So I just wanted to address something that I've heard a couple of times, and not just on the internet, but even by people in my own community, which is the idea that abortion is worse than the Holocaust. And I think that the this argument is at best naive and irresponsible, and at worst, it's morally reprehensible. So the argument is because there are millions more abortions, at least in this country, than there were deaths in the Holocaust, then there you go. It's that simple. Abortion in this country is worse than the Holocaust during World War II. So this is kind of a ridiculous idea for multiple reasons, at least two broadly. And so, first, let's start with the numbers. Um, is something worse just because there are more numbers associated with it? If I told you that there are about 20 billion hot dogs consumed each year around the world, which equates to, in the same time span as the time frame that the Holocaust took place, about 5 years, if that's 100 billion hot dogs that have been consumed in the span of 5 years around the world, does that mean that eating hot dogs is worse than the Holocaust? Obviously, this is a silly comparison, and the response would be, well, there aren't lives involved, right? Because that's the view coming from this argument, is that there are lives involved. And so then we could talk about natural causes of death. People dying from natural causes each year is around 60 million worldwide, which equates to the time span that the Holocaust took place, about 300 million deaths by natural causes. Does that mean that natural death is 50 times as bad, 50 times worse than the Holocaust? The response to this, of course, is going to be something like, well, that's different because that's not someone's life being taken. Okay, well, we could consider a variety of things, maybe gun deaths. Now, there aren't quite as many gun deaths or I should say, deaths from gun violence that occur over the course of that time span. It's maybe over the course of 5 years worldwide, there's probably around 1.2 million deaths from gun violence. And that's not nearly as high of a number for that time span, but hey, these numbers are arbitrary, right? If we're just equating values one to one, then we may as well just expand that time frame. And so certainly over the course of a couple of decades, there are many more gun deaths that take place around the world than occurred through the Holocaust. So does that mean that, gun death violence is that much more worse than the Holocaust? And then, of course, you can imagine the response to this is, well, that's not the same, because the difference here is that the Holocaust was a genocide. And the argument goes that abortion is genocide. So here's the second thing, and this is why this is really a ludicrous comparison to be making. And it's that you can't equate the personhood of a fetus, no matter what you think about it, to the personhood of someone who was brutally murdered in the Holocaust. I mean, you're comparing this fetus or baby, whatever you want to call it, regardless of what value you think this being has, regardless of what you think about this idea of their identity at this point in life, it's not comparable, because you're saying that this being who maybe feels momentary pain but doesn't have any cognitive recognition of it, because they don't have these reasoned thoughts, right? They don't have a formed prefrontal cortex, which is what gives us this higher order thinking and understanding of pain and suffering, right? Maybe something or somebody can feel pain and suffering without thinking that I am actually feeling pain or I am suffering. So you're comparing this being who doesn't register these sorts of thoughts, who doesn't have experiences or memories or hopes, dreams, or desires or preferences, doesn't have any interpersonal interactions or loved ones that they have experienced life with and cared about. You're comparing this to the people, not just Jews, but many other people during that time in World War II who had lives. They had a personhood with ideas and preferences, and they were ripped out of their homes, away from their lives, away from their loved ones. And they were tortured for long periods of time, if not days, then weeks and months, some people years. And this torture, this is probably the biggest reason why this is a morally reprehensible comparison, because there is no torture that is occurring with abortion, none at all. These people are not only physically being tortured, it is emotional and mental torture because they know and experience the suffering. They recognize that they are suffering and that it is bad. This is not something that a fetus recognizes. The people that were tortured during the Holocaust were then brutally murdered in vicious and disgusting, stomach-curdling ways. And that's just far, far beyond what a fetus experiences when it's terminated. And now this argument doesn't say anything about even the value. And this is a major discussion that still goes on. What value, what level of identity or personhood does a fetus have? And that's, of course, where the argument comes from, that this is genocide, right? People believe that fetus does have value, that it does have worth as a life. But still, to compare, even if you believe that, to compare this being who doesn't have reasoned thoughts, who doesn't know that they are experiencing pain or suffering, and really only possibly experiences it for a moment, that's nothing like the people that were tortured long term and brutally killed in the Holocaust. So no, this is an invalid argument to make, that the abortion is equivalent to something like the Holocaust. It does not take into consideration the quality of a human being. To surmise that the quantitative nature of the deaths that occur and assume that that is equal to what we see in something as horrific as the Holocaust that occurred. It disregards the lives, the quality of what it means to be a person and to have experiences and to have felt the pain and suffering long term, and disregard the consequences of that and the results of that. So no, this comparison absolutely should not be made.